This is A New Angle, a show about cool people doing awesome things in and around Montana. I'm your host, Justin Angle. This show is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. Hey folks, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. It is Pledge Week here at Montana Public Radio, so we're bringing you a special edition of our Incentives and Instincts series with economist and friend Bryce Ward. Bryce, how are you today?
I'm good, Justin. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Signs of spring are here.
Barely.
Yeah, I know. It lingers, but the days are getting longer at least. So today we're going to talk all about fake news. The broad question we'll consider is why our trust in media is so low when the quality and performance of media is arguably been improving. Bryce, let's set the stage. How has our trust in media declined over the last several years?
Several decades.
Yes.
It's gone down, right? I think, I can't remember exactly when the time of the, but, and sometime when we were kids, vast majorities of the people would have said they trusted the, quote, the media.
Yeah, in 1972, 68%
yes,
of
70%
Americans,
was the number that I was going to throw out. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, they said they trusted it a great deal or a lot. And in 2022, that percentage was 38%.
So yeah, there's been a big decline in our trust in media. So that's the descriptive fact, and
Sure.
I guess we can go from there.
Yeah, let's talk about why this has happened. There's a lot of factors. How have you kind of gotten your head around this downward trend in trust in media?
Okay, so part of it's just we just trust most institutions less. So there's some of that. But if we focus just specifically on, well, what's changed in media? The big change in media is we went from a world in which distribution of information was scarce.
Yes.
There were 3 broadcast television channels. There were, in most towns, maybe 1 or 2 newspapers.
We didn't have blogs or podcasts.
There was radio, and you might have subscribed to a magazine or 2. And that was, quote, the media.
Yeah.
Why was that the case? The case was it was hard to print. So if we're going to print a magazine or print a newspaper,
right.
That
Technology.
was expensive. And then the distribution of that printed material was also expensive, right? I had to pay somebody to literally drive around and deliver this stuff. And then with respect to television, we had regulated airwaves.
Yeah.
Same with the radio.
Yeah.
And, when we said, you can have this television broadcast license, you have to do so much public, information. And there are all these, we regulated the distribution. So we had limited the supply and the competition in that space.
Sure. And we had fairness doctrine.
You had to split. If you were going to do opinion, you had to do it evenly, all that kind of stuff. And I can even remember the commercials when I was a kid, when the TV station licensing would come up.
Yeah.
They would be like, okay, well, these are all the things we're doing. And you're like, write Congress or write whoever saying that you like what we're doing. Because it was like, they had to demonstrate the public benefit of what they were doing.
Yes, it was a different age.
That's the benchmark of, I think, that we're going to, that's when we were kids. That's what we're, looking at and saying, well, what's changed since then?
And we should add here too, and there's myriad factors we'll go into, but people trusted media more in those times. That's not to say media was performing better. The quality of the information that the average American was getting from mainstream media was not necessarily of higher quality. In fact, there's strong evidence that media colluded with government much more frequently than it does now.
Absolutely, right? So, essentially what you have is this smaller supply side. And yeah, it's much easier for them to collude.
Yeah.
And there may be even some incentives for them to collude. And, they did whatever they did. They were gatekeepers and, they were controlling us as I think, we're both from the 90s, right? It was the corporate media is controlling you and, all of these kinds of things. And, there are downsides to that limited distribution, but there's downsides to what we're dealing with now.
Yes.
And what are we dealing with now essentially is that, we made distribution effectively free. If you have information, you can put it out there. And that means that there's much more competition in media. And in theory, I love competition. Competition is great. Competition should move us towards better.
Right. Well, let's break down that competition a little bit deeper. So not only has distribution become easier, if not free, because of technological advancements, it's also allowed for competition on a variety of fronts. There's just more information. It's more fragmented and specific and matched with consumer preferences. But there's also a deeper competition or more intense competition for consumers' attention, driven a lot by social media and these delivery mechanisms that kind of use algorithms to serve people essentially what the algorithms think they want to see when they want to see it. So it's kind of on supply and demand side that competition is increasing.
The problems that we see are on both sides. And I don't know which one we want to go start down first, because supply and demand, of course, interact.
Sure.
But like, I think I'll start with demand because it's the more fundamental problem. Mm-hmm. And the fundamental problem with, in theory, moving from information scarcity to information abundance. If you would ask an undergraduate economics students and say, hey, we've relaxed this constraint, we've made the cost of information much lower, we should be strictly better off.
Sure.
We should just be swimming in the abundant information. Yeah. If you think about it, we're old enough to remember, getting information was really hard.
Oh, yeah. Going to the library, getting the Encyclopedia Britannica, looking up the thing.
When I would write, reports as an elementary school students, right? I was using my parents' college textbooks. That was what was available, right? Yeah. It was like, well, we had this book, there's got something in here. I wrote my third grade science project was on erosion. And my mom had some science textbook from college that had some section on erosion. So
I'm sure nothing had changed in the world of erosion.
Since the 60s to the mid 80s. That was information scarcity. So we're moving to information abundance, and that should be great. It's much easier for me to get the information that I need to make choices or to shape me into the person that is the best available thing. And the problem is, it's not clear that we're capable of handling that kind of abundance.
Okay, so we as consumers of media cannot
We as
handle
a
that abundance.
species.
Okay.
Right? And I think it's easiest to think about this. I'll draw it back to information, but I want to take a little detour into diet. Right? Because effectively, our problems with nutrition are the same problem.
Yeah. I think that's a great analogy.
We have made tasty, calorie-rich food abundant. Now, not everybody has the same abundance.
Of course.
But in a relative sense, if you think about, the 99.5% of humans' existence where we were hunter-gatherers, right? Relative to I was just watching Castaway recently, right? Relative to what Tom Hanks is trying to do to gather food to survive, right? As a hunter-gatherer.
Right. The labor to calorie ratio is much lower.
I can walk to the kitchen and there is a plethora of tasty, calorie-rich food that was designed to be addictive.
Yeah. Not according to my daughters on any given day, no matter how frequently I go to the grocery store. But hey.
But yeah, there's always something, right? There's been several good books recently on, why is this such a problem for us, right? And, there's several cool studies that have been both in humans and in animals, but the human one that I like, and this one's decades old, but I only learned about it recently, right? It's at some point they took people and they stuck them in a controlled environment, and they basically gave them a drink that was bland but had all the nutrition that you needed, and you could have as much of that as you wanted. Right. And they put these people in this controlled environment. And, some people effectively drank the same amount of calories from that food as they consumed before.
Okay.
Typically, those were the leaner people. The more obese people basically just stopped eating, lost a ton of weight. Right. And what this suggests, and I think other studies have found, is that some people are more susceptible to the richness of variety.
Yes.
It's our neurochemistry. It's this new drug. Right, the one that the new weight loss drug, I can't remember what it's called. Right,
starts with an O. That's Ozempic or something.
Ozempic, whatever it is. But what does it do? Essentially, it targets the chemicals in your brain that kind of are that reward motivation center, and it basically just depresses them. So it's actually what they're finding is it may actually work for addiction in a variety of forms, not just food. But we as humans, when you give us abundance, some of us can handle it, but some of us don't appear to struggle. Right. And it's that struggling that we see in all these other areas, whether it's drugs or food or, we're now seeing it, we've seen it in media for a long time, but it's a new front in this war because we've succeeded.
Sure.
We have, solved an important scarcity problem. And now here we are. And it's oh, wait, what do I do with this?
Right. And that's not to say that information is perfect. Not at all. But there is so much more information, the information you want, more abundant, probably more accurate across that source of abundance. We'll be back to my conversation with Bryce Ward after this short break. Welcome back to A New Angle. I'm speaking with Bryce Ward about trust in media.
Yeah, there's a problem. We've talked in the past about the pollution in the stream.
Sure.
And, in some sense, it's not even clear that we're better off because now instead of having to go to the library and do all the extra work to find the information, now I have to sift through bad information to find the good information, which is its own form of work, right?
It is. And there's these algorithms and AIs that purportedly do it for us that are part of this problem as well.
Yeah, and do I trust those algorithms? Even then, well, what is it feeding me? I mean, again, let's just take this out of the normal sense of media, which is the news media, right? Like, I had to buy a refrigerator recently.
Okay.
Do I trust the reviews online?
Sure, Wirecutter, Consumer Reports.
Who do I trust? And who's telling me what, and at least for me, it's very stressful. Anytime I have to buy something like this, it's like a big ticket item, and it's like, what information do I trust here?
Yeah, the costs of screwing up a refrigerator are high.
Yeah, but anyhow, so the point is that there's abundance of information. So there's a pollution stream. There's a big cost of that.
Right.
But the more dietary side is I can go get the information that I want. And the line that I've been using a lot recently with respect to our struggles with abundance is it's a reverse of the Rolling Stones song, right? Instead of I can't always get what I want, but if I try somehow I can get what I need.
Yes.
It's, now I can get what I want, but what if it's not what I need?
Yeah, it is the opposite problem.
And this distinction between want and need, and in a simple economic theory would say those should be perfectly aligned. But the reason why I did the detour into diet is it makes it very clear that at least in some times and places, want and need are not the same.
Yes.
And the demand side problem that we have is demand moves to want. Mm-hmm. And what we're struggling with is, am I getting the information that I need?
So let's break that down. When we're talking about want, we're talking about information that generally conforms to our pre-existing position, right? It makes us feel better. And information that runs counter to the opposition narrative, right? So that creates a few different things. We sort of are shopping for confirmation bias, or we're shopping as a function of our confirmation bias. But also it has created this whole ecosystem of content around complaining about the other side. Like if you watch an MSNBC segment or a show, it's generally 2/3 about how awful Fox News is and the terrible things they said. And if you watch a Fox News show, it's often about all the terrible things that were said on MSNBC. And those are catnip for this want that we have. It sort of supercharges that preference for information that makes us feel good.
This is what the studies have found, right? And this is what the algorithms do to us,
Yes.
is the things that engage us are the things that enrage us,
Yes.
right? And so as humans, we too frequently are not shopping for information to inform us. We are shopping for information to engage us. And the problem, if it were just innocuous, if engaging with information just didn't do anything to me, it wouldn't matter. The problem is that it does stuff to me, right? I am a function of the information ecosystem in which I am around. And so part of that's just, it's giving me the information about choices, but it's also then shaping my preferences, my attitudes, my perceptions of the world that I live in. And that's where it becomes a problem to have both the pollution stream in there, but also then to have the information ecosystem responding to my wants and not to what I individually would say I need.
Yeah.
But then, more importantly, because this is a collective, you can think of the information ecosystem as a commons, right? We end up with tragedy of commons. We're trashing, all of us pursuing our individual interests leads us to a place that is not necessarily the publicly socially optimal outcome.
Yeah, and sort of to further torture the food metaphor, food deserts are a growing problem, places where even if people have the desire and the energy to go find good food, that they can't. They don't have a supermarket or a restaurant that provides high quality food. Is the internet creating an information desert in a way, or?
I wouldn't use the same thing because obviously the internet means that I can get anything I want.
That's true.
Right? So
it's just harder to find.
It's harder to find. What it does is it creates more things for me to sift through.
Okay.
Right? It creates such an abundance of junk food.
Yeah.
And that's one of the, another one of these dietary studies, right? Like, I think this one was done with animals. I don't know if it was rats or whatever it was. But like, well, first thing is they learned that the fastest, if you wanted to, for research purposes, you wanted to fatten a rat up, the fastest way to do it, they tried engineering also. The fastest way was just give it a human diet. But the second thing about this is that, what they do is one of these studies, they basically just kept adding more options.
Okay.
Right. And as you added more, you can satiate yourself on, okay, here's one kind of junk food. But as I add more options, now that diversity of options just means I get more sucked into eating more because I'm the way the hardwiring in here is that's different. It's why we eat dessert, right? You could bring another slab of steak out.
Yeah. I'm not hungry for that.
I'm not hungry for that.
I'm hungry for chocolate.
Well, I'm hungry for something different.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Well, chocolate is different because it's actually literally addictive. But like, it's why tapas is so fun. Right?
Yeah, good point.
It's like, they're just going to bring me, or a buffet, right? I guess that's the more, the more American thing. This is the morass of abundance, right? The problem of abundance is it's very easy to get yourself lost in abundance.
Sure.
Or to gorge yourself in abundance. But the question is, the thing that I need, right? Am I getting that? Or am I getting lost in, hey, look at all the stuff that I can enjoy. And, I think the internet does that, right? It makes it very easy for me to not get the things that I need. And some of that's just the direct thing that I need. But the thing I think that we're learning is there were all these kind of ancillary benefits that came from the constrained choices, right? The one that I've been thinking, again, is a slightly different form of media, but just television. We used to watch television with other people.
Yeah.
Right.
It was a communal event.
It was a communal event, both within the household, but also with friends.
Sure.
And,
Let's gather to watch Seinfeld. Everybody together. Or the evening news or whatever it was.
Well, for us, it was Friends and Seinfeld. Like
sure.
I almost every episode of Friends I watched with friends. So I was talking with my college roommates about, they have older kids and they're like, yeah, everybody just disappears. Most nights it's 4 people, 4 screens. And I was like, Like I remember literally, we lived together, but even one of my college roommates I was friends with from when I was 5, like I would go to his house on Thursdays to watch Seinfeld. In some sense, that appears to be a product of constrained choices, right? It was like, it was on. It's only on at this time.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like in that moment, we were feeling a sense of abundance relative to prior media ecosystem. So this abundance thing is, you don't really know it when you have it. Although I think we're sort of realizing it to some degree. I mean, when people sort of fill out these surveys and say they don't trust the media, I don't think they're acknowledging that actually there's a lot more higher, trustworthy sources of information out there. They're just harder to find. So it's hard to know people's perception of this abundance issue and whether they actually acknowledge it as a driver of current behavior.
Yeah, and maybe this is where we segue to the supply side, right? Which is that, look, the reality is that information is more abundant.
Yeah.
If you want to learn the truth about anything, to the extent that there is, quote, truth, but if you want to learn the facts about whatever happened, if you want to, it is available to you. Right? It is absolutely available to you. Now, it may be work to find it. It may be work to have to sift through the layers of garbage that have, been layered on top of it. But I can literally just sit at home on a computer screen and get to the most advanced information about any topic that you want. We have abundance. So if you want truth in media, it's there. So why is trust falling if there's better information? Well, that competition piece, those guys are saying things I don't like. And some of this is also a byproduct of a whole segment of the media, talk radio, cable news, right-wing media, basically exempted itself from the media.
Yeah.
Right?
Explicitly.
Yeah. But it's still media, right?
Exactly. But by positioning themselves as the sort of anti-establishment, anti-liberal bias, however you want to frame it, but that was an explicit market position and an ingenious sort of way to grab market share.
Yeah, but but if we're saying, well, what is the media?
Right.
That's still part of the media.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's part of, but there was this kind of explicit attempt to, and this is part of it. If you're saying, well, what's driving that decline? That's almost entirely conservatives. Liberals still trust, quote, the media. right? Or at least the mainstream media, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Right. The decline is there, but not nearly as stark. Right. So, in some sense, this is just a marketing ploy.
Yeah.
Right. So what we're really capturing is the marketing was effective. They're still consuming media. The people who, quote, don't trust the media are consuming a form of media. And if you explicitly went to liberals and said, do you trust conservative media?
Yeah, they would say no.
They would say, heck no. Right. And so, but it's just it's that competition between them. And again, and what we're seeing with the Fox News depositions is Fox News is very explicitly responding to the demand. Right. That was the whole issue. Right. It's, well, we can't say these things. We can't say that the election was fine because, quote, our viewers will leave us.
Yeah, it's bad for the stock price.
Yeah.
And I think, too, to be fair, we should acknowledge that you see this effect a little bit playing out with the Wuhan lab leak theory. Right now, we've got federal agencies going on the record saying the most likely explanation for the COVID pandemic has been, the Wuhan lab, right? And for a long time, that was politically taboo for anyone on the left to acknowledge as even a possibility, right? You were dismissed as a racist or whatever if you even entertained that as a possibility. And as we're seeing reporting on these acknowledgments of this theory being a likely cause, institutions that have been, traditional media or left-leaning media have been a little reluctant to kind of report on that full-throatedly.
Yeah, and look, and it's not just that, right? I mean, we can go through it, like the Iraq War.
Yep.
Right? Well, that was a sales job of, that was widely accepted in the media. Oh, they're the financial crisis,
Sure.
right? Oh, this is we need to be fit. The fact that we were cutting spending during the recovery from the Great Recession is one of the great errors in economic policy. But that was what, that was the mainstream idea, and so, we are all of us are in this human bucket. We are all subject to these human flaws. And the problem that we're seeing in our media, because it is now more abundant and it is more competitive, when there's only 3 channels on one newspaper, they play it down the middle.
Absolutely. You have to.
That's how you get market share.
It's a way to get the most customers.
Right? When you're in a long tail environment, any niche view can find some form of an audience, right? And, and whatever works. And again, that's all driven by want, not need. And that gap, that fundamental disconnect between a marketplace, which is very, very good at serving up what our revealed preference suggests that we want. If you ask us, we'll say we don't want it.
Of course. Yeah, we want the truth.
I want information and all this kind of stuff. But, what actually gets the media company money is when you give me things that enrage me.
Yep. And then I keep watching.
And, it's bad for me as a media company to serve you up information that makes you, the consumer, mad. Right? Which is why you end up pushing towards polarized media.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard, to be a straight down the middle media organization without making me mad.
We'll be back to my conversation with Bryce Ward after this short break. A New Angle is supported by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and UM's College of Business. Access to capital, broadband, and education are 3 ingredients any community needs for success.
Hi, this is Kelly Webster, Chief of Staff at the University of Montana, and you're listening to A New Angle.
Welcome back to A New Angle. I'm speaking with Bryce Ward about trust in media. So let's press on this, want versus need. So the presumption in this line of thinking is that what we need, the collective we, is accurate, truthful information. That, I think you and I agree that a more well-informed populace, if an agreed-upon truth is the best in the best interest of a democracy.
The best information isn't this just like, that this is, we all agree that this is the right choice to make.
Right.
Right? Given the same information, you and I could say, no, that's not a good trade-off or not. So it's not to say that information and choice go together. But I think, I am still enough of an Enlightenment thinker, and I think our system is built on Enlightenment principles. And look, just as an individual, right? So individually, if, again, let's just go back to something that isn't politically charged. Go back to the appliance. Go back to buying the refrigerator.
Yeah. You want to know what the best appliance is.
I actually think it's not clear that all the extra information has made us better off than we were in the 50s.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there is so much crap to sort through in terms of trying to evaluate stuff. And the companies keep changing the models so fast. Sure. Right? What I want is I want a long-term study. I want to know that, the reason I had to buy a refrigerator is because the last one's, the water line broke and it caused thousands of dollars of water damage to my house.
That sounds familiar.
And when the restoration people are like, oh yeah, and the insurance company is like, oh, it was the water line, it was the refrigerator. Yeah, of course. It's like the most common thing that they see.
Yeah.
And yet to me as an economist, the insurance company should be sitting there saying, well, we're going to do long-term studies on refrigerator brands.
Yeah.
And we're going to, recruit all these households into a sample, and basically we're going to record it, and we're going to basically put out information and say, don't buy these refrigerators. And then all of us benefit because our home insurance rates go down, right? But that information, in spite of all this information abundance, is not the thing that I'm going on and saying, okay, this refrigerator is a 2% chance of dying within 10 years, which is what I want. I want to know how long it's going to last and how much the likelihood it's going to break are.
So, Bryce, there's a big mess here, right? And the question is how do we improve this media environment? I mean, I will say it is Pledge Week. We've got great sources of public media here in Montana, Montana Public Radio, Yellowstone Public Radio, Montana Free Press, etc. So there are great outlets there, but systemically, are there any pathways you see to improving this dysfunctional equilibrium that we're in right now?
On the demand side, we have to create better humans.
Right.
And that's hard because it's what the dietary stuff, and it's not to say that the mechanisms are identical in media and in diet. Food is a more fundamentally, I'm biologically hardwired to collect energy. I may not be the same with information, but it's in some sense, to the extent that we can create better humans, we need to create better humans who so we can align want and need.
Yeah, and I think part of that is teaching media literacy. We have grown into this abundant information landscape, as you've well described, but I don't think along with that we've given students the tools to navigate it, to understand hey, you don't just go Google anything all the time. I mean, there was a general rule of thumb back in the day that Wikipedia is not a good source of information, although now it kind of is a pretty reliable source of information because it's a free market clearinghouse, right? But there isn't, media literacy is not taught in our schools very often, and maybe it should be.
I actually feel better about young people's ability to deal with this than old people.
Yeah.
Right? It's
they're natives in this ecosystem.
They're natives in this ecosystem. They're adapted to it, right? It's the people who are most easily scammed online are older.
Oh yeah.
It's because they didn't
It's on the internet, it's got to be true.
They didn't develop the tools as that was, when they were at a younger, more pliable stage of their life.
Yeah.
That said, but still, we need to create better consumers, right? And that's hard. That's hard work. So if we can't really do much to the extent that we're kind of hardwired into this, then we have to then move to the harder part, which is, we got to deal with the supply side. We have to treat it as a commons, right? We have to go back to this pollution metaphor, which is, look, our information ecosystem matters, and we can't keep letting it just get trashed, right? We have to figure out a way which preserves the advantage of abundance, preserves competition, preserves all the things that we like, but doesn't create a system which is leading us to misperception of the reality of the world. Reality matters, right? And it wouldn't matter if we were susceptible to our feelings and our judgments and how we behave in the real world. For a long time it was, if you wanted the real news about what was happening in the economy, just read the business page, right? Because businesses didn't care about your political idea,
Yeah, they need to make correct decisions.
They have to make the correct decision. And what we want is for everybody to be in that world of I just need to know what the correct decision is. Mm-hmm. And, so that the part of getting better humans is about getting people to see yes, don't get tricked by your emotions. Don't get tricked by engagement. Don't get tricked into a caricature of the real world. And we've talked about this in the past. This is part of why, you also have to just fight this with not media. Right, but to fight this with engagement with the real world,
all of it,
right? Yeah. So and that's another part of the supply side, right? Is we have to make it so that people spend less time in these information ecosystems, which are polluted. If you go out in the real world, you can interact with reality. Your perception will be closer to reality because I just interacted with somebody and they were identified as something different than me and they were fine.
So are there signs for hope? I think about the Supreme Court case involving Section 230 and some of the discussion about antitrust legislation in the media and so forth. I mean, I think these things are I'm not so confident that these will land on the right solutions, but they are potentially signs that our policymakers and our legal regime are at least thinking about trying to make this ecosystem less messy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we've been down the path long enough, and I feel like every new innovation that was supposedly great kind of goes down this path, and eventually we were like, oh, wait, it's not just all benefits, there are real costs, and now we have to figure out how to mitigate those costs, and that was what 1970s pollution legislation and judicial rulings were basically about.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, wait, this wasn't really, all these great, new products weren't all that great. They created some real byproducts. We're in that phase. I think there are good things about them, but there are bad things about them. And we need to figure out how to tamp down on the bad things about them. And so we got hope, so as we figure it out, hopefully we will move. The problem is that the politicians that we have currently, we have been in this system for long enough that they are all native to this warped environment.
Yeah.
And fewer of them are survivors from the prior environment. And so it's unclear if you have the right people in place to be like, oh yeah, this is bad, because they benefit from the system as it is.
Right. So in our remaining time, Bryce, short of these sort of systemic policy level solutions coming through or Supreme Court cases or rulings or whatever, short of that, like what recommendations would you have for the listener on how to, fight the want versus need temptation and try to become a better consumer of media or demand, how do we create better humans on the demand side?
Look, the first thing you have to just do is you have to be aware of the fact that you're still a human.
Yes.
And you are subject to, and again, I want to be clear. It's very easy to be like, oh, it's only these other people that are subject to these biases. Yeah. We are all subject to these biases, right? That is the magic of the algorithm. That's why it works as well as it does. When I'm mad about some media and thinking of punishing it, right, by not subscribing or, not going to that website, is, you have to ask yourself, well, is it because it's an unreliable source, or is it because it's telling me something I don't want to hear?
Yes.
And look, if it's an unreliable source, then I don't want you to go to it. I want you to move away from it and, move towards media that is more informative, the nutritious media. But like sometimes it's the media that's saying eat your vegetables that I'm like, we just all go back to being kids.
Yeah.
Right? You're telling me to eat my vegetables. I don't like what you're telling me. And I'm mad. Don't punish media because it tells you things that you don't want to hear. Punish media because it tells you things that are false.
Yeah, I think along those lines, I have 3 recommendations to the listener. And the first is along the lines of what you mentioned there. Yeah, if you're reading or watching or listening to something that's making you uncomfortable, stick with it. Because chances are that discomfort stems from a disagreement or view that it's wrong or incorrect or biased, and sort of stick through it, consume it, and then make your opinion afterward. Don't give up on it. The other thing is understand the source, and you mentioned this a moment ago, Bryce. So understand who's producing the piece, who's distributing it, what incentives do they have, and within a piece of media, if you see an unnamed source, think through like who would have an interest in being an unnamed source here. Not that unnamed sources are bad, but they're unnamed for a reason, and a media organization allows an anonymous source for a reason. But try to figure out who that source is and who would benefit from saying what that source is saying, and that might help you gain some clarity on what the piece is really telling you. Anyway, those are kind of my rules of thumb. I don't know how useful they are to you, but give them a try.
Sounds good.
Cool, Bryce. Well, this has been fun. Get out and support sources of public media, Montana Public Radio in particular. And again, thanks for spending some time with us today, Bryce, and I look forward to our next one.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening to A New Angle. We really appreciate it. And we're coming to you from Studio 49, a generous gift from UM alums Michelle and Lauren Hansen. A New Angle is presented by First Security Bank, Blackfoot Communications, and the University of Montana College of Business. With additional support from Consolidated Electrical Distributors, Drum Coffee, and Montana Public Radio. Keely Larson is our producer. VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks made our music. Editing by Nick Mott. Social media by AJ Williams. And Jeff Neese is our master of all things sound. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.